This conference will now be recorded.
And I also know that she's had, I've worked with her and she's brought some of her friends over to the reserve just to play and entertain. And that always brings groups together, especially when there's food involved. So that's something that has been happening. And then I gotta say, Linda's quite instrumental in gathering the players to make that successful.
That's great. That's great. Yeah, and so that is really cool too. So she's kind of she's really helping people to see the excellent musicians in town and to kind of celebrate with them and learn from them. That's really great. Yeah, that's awesome. Linda's done a really great job with that program. Any other ideas about special skills in your community or kind of things that make people proud to live in your community? Okay, so the next thing that I wanted to do, we're going to skip ahead just so we have a good amount of time for people to share and chat at the end, is if we go to page 11, it's the planning your program section. And so, you know, sometimes it's difficult to select an activity or to think about, you know, come up with a brand new idea. You know, we've been programming for so long and it's easy to get kind of stuck in what we've been doing. And so one of the reasons I'm really excited about these webinars is that everybody can share together and learn from each other. But also I think it's important to remember that we don't always need a fresh, brand new idea. You know, I think especially when we look at what is successful is typically something that happens on a regular basis, and we can kind of build on those things and make them intergenerational. So you might have a program that is really cool or really successful in your community already that maybe only has youth doing it or only has elders doing it, and you could add an intergenerational component. And once you add more ages and once you add more people, people surprise you. They're very creative, and they might suggest something like, hey, you know, now that we have the kids here, maybe we can do X, or now that we have the elders, can we start learning language from them, or something like that, right? So sometimes looking at what exists in your community already is a really good first step to figuring out how to get more ages involved. And what comes to mind when I'm saying this is, hey River, you guys were talking about how there is a walking, I'll say a walking culture because it sounds like the elders typically go to the rec center and walk around the track at the top. And I know that I think it's an ice surface inside, so you can watch people playing hockey or whatever it is, and they chat. And it sounds like this is something that's really successful already. And so, you know, if people are already going to that place and they already know about that event, you know, why change it, right? Why move it to a different location or a different time? If that's already working, you know, maybe seeing, okay, when are the kids available? Could we offer snacks in one of music in one of the conference rooms next door? Or could we, you know, invite the kids to come walk around and talk about a particular subject? Or, you know, like, how can we use that really successful element of our community to get people to engage? So I am wondering, I used the Hay River example, but, and I know that there's been some other people that have given examples of things that are happening in their community, but I wonder what is happening in your community that is only happening with one age group that you think is an opportunity to kind of expand? So maybe it's a sports group, or maybe it could be anything. So yeah, the question is kind of, in your community, what is something that is occurring with only one age group that you think is a good opportunity to get people to engage more with different ages?
What about hand games? It's usually just for the young, but the adults really love to watch it. Maybe they'd like to have a senior hand game tournament.
That's a great idea. Yeah. So if the youth are already learning hand games and they have maybe a team or something, or like a regular, a weekly hand games session, that's such a great idea to have the elders to come in also. You know, they might have some really fun memories about doing hand games or some cool tricks they could show the kids. And it might even be fun to have the kids playing against the elders sometimes, right? You know, sometimes, especially as a kid, you think you're so good at something, and then, you know, somebody comes along and they've got more experience, and it can be really fun to have, you know, the experience playing with the kind of youth and vigor. I think that's a really cool idea. Are there any other ideas about something happening in your community that you could add an intergenerational element?
I have something that's working well that has worked very well in Fort Good Hope. They have what I think is called the Sylvia Kelly Annual Volleyball Tournament. But each team has to have a certain makeup. There has to be a youth, there has to be an elder, there has to be, and I'm not sure what all else. So it's a really fun time and it's intergenerational.
That's
And
really cool.
Yeah, it's crazy fun when they do that.
That's
Lots of
really
laughter.
cool. Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, I think that's such a neat idea. You know, they do that with co-ed sports teams. They have to have, you know, 2 women on every team or whatever. But how wonderful would that be to say you have to have 2 elders and 2 kids and, you know, 2 women and 2 men. You know, that would be so fun. Yeah. Any other ideas out there?
This is Carol at Eden. One of the things that I tried to do for an intergenerational program was sewing. And we brought the youth in to sew mitts with the elders. So I teamed them up with one of the seniors, and they were making mitts for themselves to take home. And but it was like the elder was watching them and how they were making the mitts. So that was quite successful. And then when I did that, it's like then also the staff and their families wanted to learn as well. So I did the same thing and teamed them up with elders and got them to make mitts with the seniors as well. So that worked out nice.
That's really great. That sounds like another really cool idea. Velma says to host a lunch with students and grandparents. I think that is also a really great idea. And one of the reasons that that would work is because students are already having lunch at school every single day. There's already a location, right? They're at the school. You don't have to rent a facility or anything like that. And it's at a time where the students are free, lunch hour, but it's also at a time that is possible for elders to get out, right? It's not early in the morning when it is really cold or dark. When it's winter time, it's at a time that's quite possible to get around. So that's a really great idea as well, is to host a lunch with students and grandparents. I know I was doing a training in Fort McPherson, and they did something like that where it was twice a week at the rec center, which is right next door to the school. They host a lunch, and elders and students come, and it's really nice. Like, there's always music on, and you know, it's very casual. So they were saying that, you know, initially when they first started doing these lunches, that, you know, the students would sit with the students, elders would sit with the elders, and there was not a ton of interaction. But you know, once you're around people a lot, you start to become more comfortable, and you can start to tell jokes and to chat with each other and ask about your day and things like that. So that's a really cool idea. Yeah, so does anybody else have any other ideas about how to turn an existing program into an intergenerational program before we move on? Great. So I want to kind of close my time for talking. I think that everyone has heard my voice quite enough. And I just wanted to kind of point your attention back to the toolkit and some of the resources that the RPA provides before we kind of go to more of a social sharing session together. So the toolkit, again, you can find it on the website and it's free and you can download it. And you'll see if you're on the computer, you can see my screen that I'm sharing here. If you're not on the computer, if you're calling in, I'll try to describe. There's these questions that I've been asking everyone already, and then there's lines in the book for you to write it in. So you can photocopy this and use it for each event that you plan, or you can just keep it as a guide. There's a lot more to the toolkit. It talks about how to develop goals. There's a budgeting sheet to help you with that. There's safety checklists, and so there's a lot more to it. This was just kind of a quick little intro, but that's a resource that is for you guys to use whenever you like. And I also wanted to remind everyone that the ARC, the Active, Resilient, Connected grants, which is kind of the COVID version of Get Active, are open September. They're open this month. And so that is an opportunity to get a little bit of funding. Maybe, you have an existing event and you'd really love the elders to come out, but you need transportation to pick them up. Or, the lunch that Velma had the idea for, that all of the things already exist, but you don't have funding for the food itself. If you're able to create an event that is physically active, then those grants are accessible to you, and a really great way to get your program going. So Stephanie, who's on this call, also happens to be the coordinator for the grants. So you can send her a private message or you can send her an email and she'll be able to help you with the grants. So yeah, I'm going to stop sharing my screen if I can figure out how to do that. And I want to turn it over to you guys, and I want to ask, so we've talked a lot about these really great programs that we can build on and take advantage of, but maybe there are some barriers that you are experiencing right now, whether it's due to COVID or just kind of the barriers that always exist in programming, and you might want some advice from some of the other amazing programmers on this call. So I turn it over to you guys to kind of help each other out and maybe bring up a barrier that you have somebody else might share. Are there any barriers and are there any ideas that people have to overcome those?
Pat here. Sometimes I find just basically if you have a program and somebody coming to do the program, this funding can be a problem. Not always, but sometimes. Also, sometimes finding volunteers to help is not always easy because we're all busy with our own lives and whatever. Anyhow, that's sort of the two areas where I find it a little difficult, but not insurmountable.
Has anybody had any success with finding volunteers? Does anyone have ideas to help Pat with that? I know it's true, and especially in our smaller communities, it tends to be one or two people that are volunteering for many things, and if they're not available or something like that, it can be really hard. So does anyone have any ideas about